Hello, my name is Sam Robinson, and I'm the Gnostic Syncretist, and this is the Gnostic Syncretist channel. On YouTube, I'm going to begin 2025, and today was the solstice, and go back into esoteric spirituality and the sacred mystery tradition. This is my website. That's one reason I've been gone. Had a crazy year. Obviously, it was a crazy year for everyone, but I redid the website, and I started a channel on Rumble for my censored material. This is it right here. If you're interested, it has about 43 videos on a whole bunch of topics related to medicine and medical countermeasures of a certain type and certain products. And you can go check it out if you are so inclined. But I realized while I was engaging in all that current events and more materialistic work that the real key has always been esoteric spirituality in the secret mystery tradition, the sacred occult mysteries. And I realized, because I realized through a friend of mine who's continually failing to realize how important it is, and that there is no substitute to this tradition. Whether it's Anthroposophy, Rosicrucianism, Theosophy, Hermeticism, like the Golden Dawn, or Christian Kabbalah with Dion Fortune and the Society of the Inner Light. There is no comparison. There is such an insane amount of nonsense all over the internet. And I've been meaning to cover this, so you know what? We're just going to start the year off strong here. We live in an era of spiritual nihilism. This is my site, and I write about these things. I have blogs on it. The esoteric wisdom becomes a light in such darkness in 2024, where spirituality has become materialized in all the major religions, and atheism and scientific materialism are the philosophy of the day. And even Satanism is even gaining ground in various capitals with statues of Baphomet in some of our state capitals because they're getting quite bold. This is really a war, a spiritual war, between dark occultism and the white light occult traditions, which goes back certainly to 130 years ago when a lot of this stuff came to light. We would have no traditional knowledge at all, if not for Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner. And some of the Alephus Levi, their works, they revolutionized the release of information about this tradition, which had never been released before. So they revolutionized our culture. Everything that's supposedly New Age or Eastern, in terms of mantras, meditation, yoga, chakras, energy, manifestation, that all came because Blavatsky released this information not only in 1876 with her first book, but then even more importantly, 1888 with The Secret Doctrine. Both are basically unparalleled. And none have ever matched it since. I mean, as sometimes convoluted and not as systematically organized as they should have been. The information is astounding, and there is no comparison. And that was the first, and there was never a second, really. And Rudolf Steiner is the only second I know of, and then Dion Fortune covers the Kabbalah and many other areas of occult initiation in her books, and I have almost all her books. And then there's a book by Max Heindel called The Rosicrucian Cosmic Conception, which gives, and it's about 600 pages, gives another major account of occult cosmology. And this is the key here. This is the reason I'm doing this video. My friend sent me a message, and he's pretty awake, but not in the spiritual area. And let me tell you, there are so many pitfalls and psyops and disinformation narratives and deviant forms of alternative spirituality that never lead you to the esoteric tradition, that just have saturated the online ecosystem in terms of video content and been promoted by algorithms or money. You see all these channels with millions or hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and you go look, and their material's trash because they just didn't dive into the real tradition. And it's not necessarily their fault because this stuff's been hidden. And I didn't discover it till I was over 30, which is almost 10 years ago now. 8 years ago in 2016. And luckily, someone bought me a Manly P. Hall book, and then that was it. Secret Teachings of All Ages was actually bought for me by my sister. She didn't even know what it was, which it's an encyclopedia of esoteric, Freemasonic, Kabbalistic, and occult mystery school information. It covers everything. I mean, not exactly generally, but not as thoroughly as one thing. I mean, it's basically like hundreds of topics. And he does an amazing job compiling it all so that it wouldn't get lost. And that was 1928 or 9 that I think it was released. The guy was 26. You should look up Manly P. Hall if you have never heard of him and read his stuff. But that's just the beginning. He revered Helena Blavatsky. He's a great lecturer that is still out there on the Manly P. Hall Society channel about what he thought of Helena Blavatsky and her secret doctrine. Now, this is the difference between New Age spirituality, New Age origin stories, which I ran across, and ancient alien stories, and all sorts of other stories. This is the secret doctrine. Do you see how big this is? This is 2 books. Cosmology and Cosmogenesis and Anthropogenesis, meaning the origins of the universe, or really the emanationary scheme from absolute on down, and how it actually functions and unfolds from non-being to where we are now in the most dense material realms. The second book is about humanity and how we spiritually evolved from a completely non-physical being through multiple stages of non-physicality until we became materialized. And the reason it's so vastly different than ancient alien hypothesis or any genetic engineering theory or narrative that involves either some sort of physical progenitor, like the Anunnaki, or whether it's aliens, like off-world beings like the Pleiadians, Blue Avians. There's all sorts of, basically I'd call them psyops and spiritual dross and spiritual trash stories proliferating all over the internet. Every one of them is materialistic. Scientific materialism is guiding or driving all of it, whether they know it or not. I'm sure plenty do know it. But in this book, you see that symbol? That is an Ouroboros with that's not a Jewish star. That is the upward pointing triangle and the downward pointing triangle, male and female, and the perfect star. It's like a Merkaba. And then in the middle is the Ankh, which represents man. And then you have the swastika, which was considered the most sacred symbol of occultism. In the Kabbalah, that symbol is placed on the Logos, the first manifestation, Kether. That's one of its symbols to meditate on. The swirling star, Thor's hammer, the swastika. It only became dark and phallic and evil when the Nazis took the circle off, because it's in a circle. There's this circle with that in the middle, and it's spinning a different way in this version. It's hard to tell. It spins a different way. The Nazi symbol spins the other way because they inverted it. It's inverted occultism. The Thule Society and there was another occult society, the Nazis. They took her concepts of root races and thus the Aryan race, which is actually in the cosmology, right there. And they perverted it and applied it to themselves. Now, the Nazis had a very interesting myth It's called the Aldebaran, the myth about the Aldebaran mythos, where these Nazi cultists believed that they were from an off-world planet and had off-world progenitors that were, of course, physical, and that they were racially and bloodline related to these gods, what they call gods. Gods are non-physical, ladies and gentlemen. They're never physical. It's impossible for them to ever become physical. An avatar descent is not a god. That's like a demigod. So, but anyway, they don't generate beings physically. They don't produce them. They don't genetically engineer them. They don't create them. They're involved in basically forging parts of their being. But it's completely different than anything in any of these New Age stories or Zecharia Sitchin-like stories about genetic engineering by the Anunnaki, by these giant beings, or, we were created by the Pleiadians, or the Dr. Neruda interviews where I could go on forever. The problem is, people like this guy right here are promoting this stuff. And he's gotten called out by Christians recently because it's obvious. This guy doesn't know his stuff, ladies and gentlemen. This guy's not very intelligent. I mean, he's not dumb, but he's not doing the work. He doesn't study the actual esoteric tradition. This is 1,500 pages. This is Max Heindel's book. This is 600 pages. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying, like, there's a depth to it that cannot be taken away or replaced or altered. It is in-depth material. There is no exoteric version of the esoteric. That's what that means. Exoteric is for the average person and the masses and not the religious elite. And I don't mean by, like, elite. I just mean they just didn't release it to the public. It goes back to ancient Atlantis. And the Eleusinian mysteries and the Odinic mysteries and the Druidic mysteries. I have all these traditions on my site right here. And there were a whole bunch of mystery traditions before Christianity. Eleusinian, Druidic, Kiberian, the mysteries of Adonis and Attis, the Babylonian mystery school and tradition of Ishtar, mystery school tradition of Atlantis. This is really Plato's rendition that he got from an Egyptian priest. And then there's the mystery school of Bacchus and the mystery school of Orpheus, the Orphic mysteries, the mystery school of Odin, the Mithraic mysteries, and then an introduction. So these are my blog articles. Feel free to go check these out at the GnosticSyncretist.com. But the main point is that every time in history has had, for the most part, until they were, all those traditions were either ended up their own degeneration into phallicism and, pagan orgies of the formerly holy rituals that were held by initiates and people that were deeply esoteric, that were, high adepts of esoteric tradition. I mean, they were all throughout the ancient world. Now, they did not tell the average worshiper in their culture anything esoteric. And there were multiple levels of initiation. You had normally 2 or 3 stages, or up to 7. 3 would be the rough estimate. 7 would be much more inclined to be like it is today. If you go look at a normal mystery school, like at the Golden Dawn, there's all these different grades. But in the old world, there were basically neophytes who were prospects, and they had to go through multiple years, and then they become an initiate, and then they can become an adept or a hierophant. And you got introduced to greater and greater depths of knowledge the further you went. And not everybody made it that far. But the average person thought that those mythological stories were real when they represented cosmic truths and principles and laws about universal manifestation or emanation, or about natural powers of the natural world. or psychic phenomenon. I mean, it was all sorts of things. But they didn't just throw that out there in front of the masses. Now, they may have been right or wrong for not doing so. Nowadays, we are having a serious issue with spiritual nihilism, and the esoteric wisdom can become a light in this darkness today, but I don't see anyone really producing a ton of it unless you go to the Theosophical Society. But there are a few, like G.G. Young, who I highly respect, and is an amazing anthroposophical scholar and mystic, along with Dark Journalist, who is basically integrated concepts on the UFO file, continuity of government assassinations, the mystery schools, Gurdjieff, Ospensky, and Edgar Casey readings and information on ancient Atlantis and what he called what's called the Belial group and the opposing white occult group, the Emilius group, and how they've fought over information and technology called the Two-Eye Stone. And so he kind of bridges all these gaps. And then there's Mark Passio, who I just want to give the greatest thanks to for all of his work. But then you got guys like him who are basically sowing misinformation, either deliberately or because they don't have the knowledge. But they're just, he's an opportunist. And he just got destroyed. And I'm not going to attack him over Christianity, because you could attack those Christians just as well. Because that was not a fair debate. And even though he's not who he says he is, and he clearly does not read 1,600-page books, no matter what his bio says, or what his accolades he has listed off in the front of every interview are, he does not ever mention the esoteric mystery tradition. That is the case. He does not do it. Why would he not? That is where the fount of wisdom flows throughout all the centuries. Out of that tradition, it's what's called the perennial tradition for a reason. And this guy, and to me, like, look here. If you study the global elite and all their plans, and you saw these listed at the bottom as who he's working with, you would know immediately this guy was a psyop. They're like, you don't get promoted by these people unless they want you to be. You don't see Alex Jones being promoted by these people. You don't see Steve Bannon promoted by these people. Not that I'm saying that these are, not esoteric level, though Steve Bannon does study Gurdjieff. Rolling Stone, Time, Forbes, USA Today, no, we would never trust someone who was endorsed by those. Yet, since it's esoteric, supposedly esoteric information, or forbidden knowledge, as he calls it, it's okay. But anyone that popular is not a guru. Just like Sadhguru is not a guru. Sadhguru has like 1 million followers and goes to the World Economic Forum meetings. That means that he's not a guru. I mean, no guru is actually ever out in the open, really. It's very rare. If you look at Blavatsky's teachers, they were completely hidden in the mountains of, like, India. And they were random people with a name you'd never hear of. It would never be out openly promoting themselves to the public. That's not a guru. That's an opportunist or a disinformation agent of a spiritual type, because there are those out there. Actually, there's so many of them, it's kind of mind-boggling. So that's why I'm doing this video, because the fact that Rudolf Steiner, Blavatsky, Anthroposophy, and Theosophy, which are the first open mystery schools, are not mentioned by a whole slew, or really ever, like Gaia TV, the New Age movement, and alternative spiritual movements. This guy, Billy Carson, or David Wilcock, means something is wrong, and seriously wrong, with all these individuals. When this tradition is sitting there, those are only 130 to 100 years old, and they're still around. The Theosophical Society is still around. Anthroposophy is still around. Waldorf schools are from Rudolf Steiner, and all sorts of things. Biodynamic farming. They didn't disappear. Manly P. Hall tapped into it. He only died in 1990. So what's going on? Well, there is a deliberate push of online spiritual disinformation through narrative creation of a scientific materialistic type based in aliens or in off-world progenitors that genetically created us. This is inherently the Nazi myth from the 30s. The out the bar myth. If you want to look into that, go watch Gigi Young's videos on it. She does an amazing job. But the whole point is that they are not telling anyone the real cosmology. And as complicated as it is, it's not so complicated that none of them would have read any of this stuff. But apparently there is a missing paradigm for the most part. They don't mention Ahriman. Some people mention the Archons, but nobody mentions Rudolf Steiner's Luciferian or Ahrimanic entities, when Ahriman is directly tied to a transhumanist scientific materialism ideology and creating it, according to Steiner. So, in the occult cosmology, there is a path for the human race to gradually unfold our innate yet starkly latent potentials with spiritual evolutionary responsibilities, really, to develop, evolve, and rise out of gross matter. That's ascension. That's what real ascension is. You re-spiritualize your subtle bodies, and specifically your physical vehicle. There's no introducing cybernetics or biotech or nanotechnological implants and then ascend. That's not ascension. That's descension down into the 8th sphere, which I'll cover later, and de-evolution. We have a very specific, according to all the major traditions of the mystery schools, that whenever it's been released, anyway, which is in this book. This is Blavatsky's. Part of it was covered in Isis Unveiled, and always make sure you get the larger editions because otherwise they leave stuff out. This is Steiner's Cosmic Memory, a little shorter. And then Max Heindel released this by 1915, and he wanted to give the esoteric Christian Rosicrucian cosmoconception, which is still extremely similar and largely the same cosmology released by Blavatsky. And this had never been released. Ever. After this, within, basically 100 years, you suddenly had Eric von Daniken and all these ancient alien theorists go mainstream in the 70s and then on into the 90s, and now it's just on the History Channel all the time. That inherently means it is a psychological, spiritual operation by someone to misdirect humanity away from true occult cosmology and esoteric philosophical wisdom on these topics. Because, let me tell you, these elites have studied it as well. Long ago. They hijacked this information. They even hijacked Blavatsky's Lucifer Trust. She didn't mean Lucifer the way most people think they do if they're Christian. The Lucifer Trust was created by Blavatsky, and it was hijacked, and it's not part of the UN. She had nothing to do with any of that. The Theosophical Society kind of lost its way with Krishnamurti and trying to create a world teacher, and that's why Rudolf Steiner broke off and created Anthroposophy. But he had great respect for the true initiates that he said stood at its inception, including H.P. Blavatsky, Alcott, W.Q. Judge. This is Ocean of Theosophy. This is an easier version of this cosmology. He covers the same topics in a much more short form, in kind of an overview, much less deep in depth than Blavatsky's, which goes off on tangents, but it's amazing. But if you need an easier introduction, you can read that book, Ocean of Theosophy by W.Q. Judge. He was one of the founding members of the Theosophical Society, along with Alcott and Blavatsky. And then Annie Besant carried it on into the future, and is the one who backed Gandhi. She created the anti-British imperial Gandhi movement, and there's many pictures of her with Gandhi. So these occultists were good. There are light occultists, and there are dark occultists. And the dark occultists don't want you to know about the light occultists at all, while they use that knowledge to try and gain complete control over the spiritual development and mental framework of the human race. And they're not doing a terrible job, honestly, in the last 4 years. Sadly, because that was a mass spell. But to combat that, we have to know not only our actual cosmological history that they know and that was finally released 140 years ago, 130 years ago by Blavatsky, and then added to over the years by several others like Steiner. And this is called the spiritual evolutionary chain of rounds, globes, worlds, and root races, which is not somehow never talked about by any of these new age deceptive gurus. It's amazing. And who are, as I say, unquestionably leading humanity towards a transhumanist world dystopia with an atheistic, materialistic, alien, or AI religion. I mean, you're already seeing the rumblings of this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. There were a few brave initiates of a very powerful type who saw this coming and decided on a controversial course to release long-withheld occult teachings only taught to the initiates. Blavatsky specifically did that, and Rudolf Steiner did as well, and they were both attacked. I mean, the Nazis burned down his Goetheum that he built. He created a building. It was a huge building. They burned it down. The other occultists burned it down in Germany. He was from Austria. So that was the closing era of the 19th and the early 20th century. And since then, it's only gotten worse. What they were attempting to do, these initiates, like Blavatsky, there was a movement within the occult schools to, in some way, combat what they saw as a descent into scientific materialism and a mechanistic worldview, absolutely absent any sort of spirituality or spiritual philosophy, or even a religious one, really. And so they took action. They decided to use Blavatsky in an attempt to finally give out some of this information. And thus the Theosophical Society was created. And for a little while there, you had an occult renaissance, I would say. And then you enter into the 20th century, and you eventually have World War I, and then World War II. And after that, you don't see any more of these people. Almost every one of them, whether it's Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, Edgar Cayce, Dion Fortune, Rudolf Steiner, Blavatsky, they're all dead before 1950. And you don't see another one. So there aren't any more adepts that have come into the public arena with this level of information again. And no one's been able to match this information. Someone who teaches methodologies of the occult tradition, like Kabbalah, is John Michael Greer. Now, he's alive. He has great books. He doesn't cover necessarily cosmology, though. And our origin story is pivotal because so many false origin stories are being proliferated online. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So, the problem that they saw, Blavatsky and Steiner, was that humanity was going to descend into an ever-increasing psycho-spiritual rigidity, densification, and mechanistic ways of thinking about life and about ourselves. We were in serious danger of falling so deeply into philosophical materialism that our proper esoteric evolutionary path was at risk, serious risk of total spiritual stagnation if our trajectory continued on to the next century. And they did what they could. But Steiner saw that the real war was 100 years later, specifically starting in 2016. And here we are. That is the year that I woke up, strangely enough. And I won't go into my personal awakening. Strangely, that is what year he said it would begin. I've never stopped. I mean, I've been on a continual research bonanza for like almost a decade now. Regardless, we just had the last 4 years occur, and we have people like Elon Musk and Yuval Noah Harari and many others, Peter Thiel, and these biotech and AI technological companies, by like Sam Altman and others, pushing and openly mentioning the technology that they want to bring out and introduce to all of us, and it's almost already out. I mean, Neuralink has already done several brain operations. Of course, there's probably more advanced technology out there that we don't know about. The point is, nanotechnology already exists. DARPA was working on this stuff 15 years ago. And the reason that matters is because that is the exact type of thing that these cosmologies related to aliens, technology, and physical benefactors from the off-world, what do they always bring? What's the one thing that makes them divine, but not really? Technology. Genetics. And advanced space and aeronautic vehicles. Does any of that have anything to do with anything that's super physical, super sensible, or non-material? Which, meaning of a higher world, a higher plane, a less dense substance, as in the worlds of the cosmology in both Rudolf Steiner and Blavatsky's teachings. You have multiple planes. You have higher planes of the septenary cosmos, the divine and formless world of spirit. You have the archetypal world, the intellectual and creative world, the substantial or formative world, and the physical material world. That's where we are. Do any of these alleged genetic engineering deities from off-world ever have anything to do with any of these spiritual planes? No, they do not. Unmentioned. Removed. Replaced is the best word for it. Replaced. The spiritual hierarchies from these cosmologies, such as the Lords of Form, the Lords of Flame, the Lords of Mind, these are all like creative groups of beings that helped move us forward in evolution by influencing and somewhat molding different subtle bodies that when we were in that stage. And I'm not going to go through all that tonight, obviously. But the point being, genetics is inherently a materialistic concept. There is no genetics in the ether body. There's no genetics in the astral body. There's no genetics in the mental body or the spiritual soul body, buddhi or atma, or even the vital body. It's only involved in one vehicle, our most developed but our least spiritual and most dense, the physical body, our vehicle for all those other principles. Genetics has literally nothing to do with our origins whatsoever in terms of being a species or a race of beings. It has absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. We evolved from a completely non-physical, astro-etheric, like phantom, basically, millions of years ago on a different Earth that was also of the same substance. It would be, you couldn't see it today. It's totally invisible. It's on a vibratory level that does not exist in this material realm that we're at now. It densified, and we are here we are today because of densification of spirit into matter. The spiritual substance falls into matter, becoming densified vibrationally until it reaches full materialization, which is where we are. And then the next part of that, which is why this is so important, is the evolutionary stage. That first part is called actually involution, the spiritual substance falling into the material form. But then that material form re-spiritualizes on the ascending arc, which is we're in the start of that. That's why Steiner had something called the etherization of the blood, which G.G. Young goes into in one of her wonderful videos. The point being, the future evolution of humanity is not cybernetics. That's going backwards. It is transforming not only our morality and our socio-cultural values back to ones that are much closer to the way Christ and the Christ impulse or any of those other great sages from all the different traditions would want us to go towards. The Rosicrucians pushed for this. Universal brotherhood and, diminishing of our ego, and spiritualization of the body, which really means de-densification on the upward arc. We will become etheric again, and so will our planet, if we evolve on the proper path. All this is meant to take us off the proper path. And there's a big reason for that. There are these entities that I've done a couple videos on, which in the Gnostic tradition were called the Archons, and they were basically spiritual parasites of a super physical type. They were not physical. Even in that story, they attempted to create us, and they couldn't create us. They couldn't actually make us alive. They can only work on some of our bodies. But that wasn't the full story. The full story is mentioned in the anthroposophical and theosophical traditions, and it's very intricate. But, and specifically in Rudolf Steiner's version, there are these beings called the Ahrimanic and Luciferic entities and spirits, and they're basically beings that had a use and a place in the spiritual hierarchies, and lords of mind, lords of form, and basically a sect of these waves of life that were not physical, because they were ahead of us, so to speak. Because when you are of a more advanced type, which apparently we will get there in the future, your lowest body is not the physical body. So you have 7 principles. And in these higher types, it stops with the etheric or stops with the astral body. Their lowest vehicle isn't the physical body like we are. And they went through this stage, whatever their previous evolutionary chain did that. But then they moved beyond that. But then there are stragglers and ones that, because you have, so to speak, free choice, you can fail your evolutionary path and development at any stage, really. And that's mentioned. So there was basically these beings rebelled. And the Ahrimanic beings that left, and specifically surround Ahriman, which I know is a Zoroastrian deity, but this is what Steiner calls them. And they broke away from the wave of life that they came from. And when you do that, that means you have jumped out of the life wave of the chain of worlds and rounds in spiritual evolution. You don't get back in. You can't get back in, as far as we know. Yet, here we are with these beings, according to Steiner, and it seems to be occurring now with these elite and transhumanism. They want to get back into the life wave using us. And they are parasites. They need us. They need us as an emotional energy source. They feed on us. Yet more importantly, they want to become us through trapping us in pure materialism perpetually by drawing us into what's called the 8th sphere. And the 8th sphere is mentioned by Steiner, but before 1883 it was never mentioned, and it was considered one of the most secret of occult secrets, never to be mentioned to the public. And A.P. Sennett, who was a aspiring theosophist and a member of an upper class family, and was an academic intellectual who got really interested in theosophy. He was like a former banker. Well, he was given some of this information, and he released it, and he did it incorrectly, and had misinterpreted the actual information about the 8th sphere. As always, as is typical of an intellectual, he materialized the concept. He said the 8th sphere was the physical moon. And the physical moon is something, and I won't go into that. But what happened was an uproar, and he had completely done exactly what we do, and we materialize things as a thought form and as a concept. Now, that's what ancient aliens is. That's what this new age strange cosmologies are. They take spiritual hierarchies and turn them into alien hierarchies, which is physical. One's non-physical, the other's physical. They take our subtle body development and earth incarnations from different frequencies into different forms, from etheric, astral, pseudo-etheric, almost completely materialized, and then full materialization in these root race time periods, which is the Lemurian race, when we fully materialize and separate into the 2 sexes. That being before the earth fully materialized, was androgynous and only pseudo-physical. And way before that, it wasn't physical at all. It's like an astral phantom. So, you get these, I don't know, the word's Klaus Schwab, reimagining, reframing of spiritual concepts. And there's no way it's not on purpose. Now, there's plenty of people that get into that stuff and then have no idea that that's the case. And they perpetuate information that they did not gather and collect and create themselves. Obviously, there are people that did that, though, in secret or out in the open. And with so much of the online spiritual ecosystem of information being saturated with nothing but New Age and ancient alien hypotheses, and along with other conspiracy, like false conspiracy sites like Flat Earth, which isn't even really involved in cosmology, you realize that it's a tsunami of information that just washes out any real occult traditional concepts out of the way. They don't even stand a chance algorithmically to ever be found. And if not people like Gigi Young and Dark Journalist and Mark Passio and several others, there would be no one doing video content on this unless you want to go to the Theosophical Society's YouTube channel, and you can do that and look that up. But there's not people doing podcasts on this stuff. There's not people doing video casts on this stuff. And if they do, they have no subscriber base and have limited reach. While this guy has like millions of subscribers and was even on Joe Rogan, but he's clearly not engaging in true occult material or esoteric mystery school material. He's just, this guy is ridiculous. I mean, look at this. The Anunnaki ancient secrets revealed. What are these? These are like physical aliens again. And of course, he has a QR code. And trust me, no one who knows anything about QR codes and how the elite use them to track you would ever put that on there. Ancient secrets revealed. Manifest destiny. Buy a ticket. Yep, see, he wants money. And then you've got this. This is strange. First class space agency. And here's the technological pitch. An innovative trailblazer, the realm of aerospace. Huh. It's the same aerospace people that probably promote the UFO attack PSYOP. Is dedicated to advancing the frontiers of space exploration and technology. When you understand the occult cosmology, space has no value, literally at all, really. It's only materialistic value. You have a planet to evolve on for a reason. You've been evolving with that planet for millions and potentially billions of years, from totally superphysical states of existence down to now. This is your world. This is your sphere of evolution and development. You don't change to another world. That's leaving the chain of spiritual development in the evolutionary path. You don't go around conquering other worlds, taking materials. Because if you spiritually evolve and etherize your bodies as a human race, say we all did that, you wouldn't need to go out and colonize space. You'd be beyond that phase. You'd be on a frequency above full materialization again. And thus that would be totally unnecessary and pointless and redundant. I mean, it would be a non-issue. It would be non-existent. Because we wouldn't be able to interact with those planes anymore. We would have ascended. Truly ascended. Ascension is not literally ascending into space and exploration. The exploration is within, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they don't want you to realize. And even if you do realize it, they want to make sure you have a cosmology that is absolutely going to misdirect you into some sort of genetic engineering. I mean, my friend, I love him to death, he sent me another video or another article about that seemed once again somewhat esoteric. And let me see if I can find it real quick. Because it just blew me away. Once again, it was so easy to tell. Where is it? It's called the Ascension Glossary. the law of one. That all things are made of intelligent energy are part of the all one. The law of one contains the sacred sciences which explain the mechanics of the Christ consciousness that comprise the natural laws governing the universal creation. This is not how the esoteric tradition talks. It's close in pseudo esoteric terminology here. All dash one is the recognition that the eternal truth is eternal love, and that the state of eternal love is the organic consciousness of the infinite creator or God source. I mean, that is literally a distortion of what's actually stated in the secret doctrine. There's no love involved with the absolute, unconditioned, unmanifested, eternal principle and essence. It has no attributes. It has no characteristics. It is non-being. Literally. It cannot have those attributes, or it's now been basically boxed in by the concept you've given it. It must have nothing. It is nothing, yet is the potential for everything. That is the absolute, eternal, unconditioned essence, according to Blavatsky, Steiner, or the Rosicrucians, all of them. What they're saying here is that it's eternal love. Well, now you give it an attribute. This is not the esoteric tradition. That's how you can figure this out. It's that simple. But if you've never read this stuff and you don't know these apophatic ways of describing basically the principle behind the manifested universe that is eternal and never manifested, yet all manifestations come from its root essence of non-being and unmanifested essence, basically. I mean, it has no way to be defined. They don't give it a definition. That's the point. And so anything that's giving it a definition is not the cosmology of the esoteric tradition, because they never do that. They always use apophatic or negative terminology when referring to the absolute principle. So, once again, it says the unity consciousness is at one with God, and this unity consciousness is that which ignites the inner light of Christos, held as an eternal flame within the sacred crystal heart. I mean, this is completely manufactured nonsense. I don't know who made this up. The inner light of Christos, when actualized into a manifest form, it would never actualize into a manifest form. I mean, that sounds esoteric, yet it's an absolute convoluted distortion of esoteric concepts and the occult mystery school traditional philosophy. I mean, it's amazing. I was stunned. The inner light of Christos, actualized into a manifest form, is the embodiment of an eternal God human that holds the title of a cosmic citizen. There it is. And therefore is GSF. When we practice expressing loving kindness, we build unity consciousness that is directly reflected as the true nature and holy image of God's love is eternally protected within angelic humans. There's angels, and then there's humans, and we'll be an angel. But that's a state of being that is not physical. And then it starts mentioning manifested different timelines and universal time matrix and world humanism. As you can see, this is a manufactured psyop by probably the Lucifer Trust or Dark Occultists from high-level cult families to misdirect everybody. And this happens all the time. So, this is my point tonight. That what I'm going to do for 2025 is I'm going to begin podcasting a series of podcasts on all sorts of esoteric cosmology information, all sorts of information relating to root races, all sorts of information relating to our various subtle bodies, because every one of these things, when people don't know about them, is a vulnerability, so to speak, for spiritual deviation. It's how it goes. They do this constantly. I couldn't believe it. And I keep telling him about this information. He doesn't go study it, but then he finds this whack job, distorted, warped information that can seem true if you're not armed with the occult traditional knowledge. G.G. Young says the exact same thing. If you don't know the occult, cosmological, spiritual evolution of chains, rounds, and globes, and root race bodies, and humanity's spiritual involution, fall into matter, and then what its future evolution of reascension into spirit. It's a U. Like that. You start at one side and you end up back at the other. And as you fall into matter, you lose and become less spiritual in the sense of you're densifying. Substance-wise, vibrationally, you become materialized. Yet you have these bodies as you gain them through the process. But then you reach the peak materialism. That's where we are. And that's what Steiner and Blavatsky said. And now you go on the ascending arc. You re-spiritualize with everything you've gained and become non-physical again. In each stage, there's 3 more stages. There's 2 more root races. And I mean, well, I won't even go into those tonight. But the future path of humanity is a non-physical path of spiritual vibratory frequencies. Your body will not be physical if we do it properly. And we're anywhere near that stage. The point being, if you start injecting mineral stage technologies, which is what these biotech, nanotech, transhumanist technological advancements are, they devolve you. They will make you detached from your spiritual bodies, and they will trap you and imprison you in a permanent state of materialism and the apex of densification. You will not move on as a race. They will make us infertile, they will depopulate us, and then they will cut us off from our spiritual bodies, and we will be morphed into what they call human 2.0 cybernetic humans. There's no going back after that. We become like the Ahrimanic beings who failed their spiritual evolutionary path and are stuck, wondering how they're going to get back into the life wave, which they can't. And so, because they failed, they are using these transhumanists and as a vehicle to turn us all as a race into vehicles for them permanently. Because if we spiritualize out of these substance frequency densities, if we become super physical, they have no vehicle. That's the point. If we follow that pathway, they lose their vehicles for incarnation that they want back, and they can no longer parasitically feed on us. So there is a deep reason why this ideology is being pushed, and it is not because the global elite came up with it. Now, they're driving it, obviously, on this plane, but there's a darker force behind that idea and ideology that is not physical. Yet it must accomplish it in a physical manner, which is the strangest point of it all. And the 8th sphere is how they're going to do that, because the more we materialize and the more we push for this AI, transhumanist, nanotech human, the closer we get to being drawn into the 8th sphere. And the 8th sphere is basically a place where leftover cosmic residue and dross and refuse and trash from the process of Earth incarnations, basically, and changes, gathers into a place that starts to become concentrated. Not on this plane initially, because it's not on this plane. But it's forming into a sphere, and they call it the 8th sphere. And it was a secret held by the Mystery Schools and released accidentally and poorly by Episonet. Blavatsky tried to address it to a degree in The Secret Doctrine, and about page 144, but still doesn't really say that much, and Steiner says a lot more. And there are lower dimensional entities of a failed evolutionary chain, the Luciferic spirits and the Ahrimanic spirits, but specifically the Ahriman spirits, who are trying to use this 8th sphere influence to draw humanity into it and to basically knock us off the spiritual evolutionary chain into the eighth sphere, where we will remain as, hosts for these failed entities and Ahriman. As far as we can tell, for all time. I don't think you can get out of that. Because once you get knocked off your chain of evolution, there's no going back. It's still moving on. It's a phase. The Earth's in the phase, and so are we. We do it together. That's the point. This is our home. This is our planetary vehicle of evolution, just like we have a physical one, as above, so below. The world and Earth, Gaia, is that spiritual evolutionary vehicle for development. And so, obviously, that means we're also distorting her with all these technologies, but we're not going to go into that tonight. So, the point is, the 21st century will witness a fight for the spirit of humanity, and it is my opinion that it will be a lot worse than a century ago, in which Steiner warned about this, as humanity is reaching the point of no return. Should we fail to stop the madness of transhumanism, our failure will inevitably result in the creation of a transhuman 2.0. Part machine, part man, part mineral, and part what we are now in the higher stage of development, but zero spirit. Subtle bodies disconnected, replaced with cybernetic mirrors and simulacrums of those same bodies, but not accessing the same realms or the same energies or the same frequencies. And will become a failed evolution as a spiritual entity and as a spiritual race. Period. That's what's at stake. We need a real spiritual awakening, one that is rooted in these traditions of Anthroposophy, Theosophy, Rosicrucianism. And we need it through the real occult knowledge, because this is the key to stop the descent into transhumanism and to fulfill our path into the future. It's the only way to do it. This information must be widespread and must be understood, because there's so many out there, and either deliberately manufactured or, people are just engaging in some sort of fantasy narrative writing about alternative spirituality, and they don't even know. I don't know what these people think they're doing with these channeling, talking to Pleiadians, and the blue avians are going to save us. There's galactic councils, there's ancient aliens, there's channelers who supposedly speak to these galactic councils and these races of Pleiadians and Syrians and blonde-headed, white male groups of aliens from the cosmos. This is ridiculous. There's no way to verify any of that information. It doesn't even make sense, because all of it's physical. Spiritual things are spiritual. They're not physical. You can have a physical book with spiritual information in it, but you never reach the spiritual planes until you do it with yourself. You have to go inside. There's no going outside. There's no using technology to get to the astral plane for astral projection. That takes training, dedication, and years of meditation. But potentially many years, unless you, of course, use the gateway process from the CIA, which is something else entirely. But you're a spiritual entity with 7 bodies. You have the body. Here are the 7 bodies. Nobody talks about this very much either. And if you knew about this, you would never get caught up in all these concepts about genetics, or whether our genes matter so much. Genes are only related to this body down here, the physical body, called the Sathula Sarira, the Earth. So there's an as below. This is from Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. You have a comparison. These are the 7 bodies and principles of man. Here are the relatable concepts in the cosmos. So as above, so below. The body to the earth, the life essence, prana, chi, life essence or energy, the ether. Astral body, linga sarira, astral ideation, reflecting terrestrial things. The mirror world of astral planes, which is Yesod in the Kabbalah, and there's various ways about explaining this. You have the animal soul, cosmic energy, the animal soul. or the emotional soul, or the desire body. Then you have that's what they call the human soul, which is really the mental body, and it normally potentially breaks up into two pieces, the higher and lower mental bodies. So that's broken up because you have the lower mind, which is like for rational conceptualization, math, normal cognition, and reasoning. And then you have the higher mind, which is intuition and elevated states of consciousness, universal cosmic active intelligence. And you have the spiritual soul, which is the vehicle for your monad called the universal spirit, or Atma. They call it Atma Buddhi in the Secret Doctrine because they're inseparable. The monad, the divine fractal essence of the Absolute, that is a ray of and a reflection of the non-manifested Absolute essence, everything needs a vehicle. That's how these things work. It's in the Kabbalah too. Buddhi is its vehicle. The spiritual soul houses the spirit. The human soul is housed in this body. And this astral body and the life essence are connected. And then the seventh body holds all of them. This is the one related to genetics. It has nothing to do with these. And when you know that, and then you know about root races, and you know about these various planes, and then you see this massive cosmology here. This is Blavatsky's cosmology. This one's not technically in the book. This is a great breakdown. You realize that none of these people are telling you any esoteric or occult information from the mystery schools. Period. Because it's much more complicated. It's much less physical in its concepts. Because there's only the lower physical plane, all the way down here, right here. Just like in the Kabbalah, Malkuth, the Earth globe. And then there's all these other things above it in terms of less density. This is densification down to here. And then you rise back up. This is the least material, most rarefied frequencies and things in the universe, which, are like the gods, the Dayan Chohans of the first manifested places. So, none of that's mentioned in this guy's information, okay? This guy, he may not be a New World Order shill, but he is not giving out real esoteric spiritual information. He's basically an opportunist, and I feel sorry for him, honestly, at this point. I mean, what else do we got here? What is this? This guy's a joke. Look at this guy. I mean, he does things where he celebrates himself for making a positive impact in the world. I don't think that he's doing that. I mean, come on. This guy is a capitalist extraordinaire. That's ridiculous. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to stop there. I didn't mean to even go a full hour. The point being, and we're going to continue discussing this in the next podcast, we need a real level of spiritual and occult traditional information to be out there on the internet in video form and podcasts. And I've rarely seen any of it, which is why I guess I'm going to go do a series on it myself. And last year was devoted to other things, so this year is going to be esoteric knowledge from the mystery schools. We're going to do a whole bunch of podcasts, so I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll subscribe and like this video, and I hope you'll see me in the next one, because we're going to talk about the New Age diversions and deceptions and the specific ones and how they work, and why they are deviant, and what they do specifically to the seeking individual post-awakening. Because the awakening is just the beginning. Then you actually have to evolve and develop yourself. The awakening is just the inclination and the stirring in the body of the individual, the subtle bodies, that there's something more going on in the world, and that there's something more within yourself that deserves attention and is not physical and is a higher level of consciousness or essence than you originally felt you had within you. And whatever reason we wake up, and have this stirring doesn't really matter. The fact is that you did, and that people do and are doing it, and then they're being captured by pseudo-occult, pseudo-spiritual teachings that is diverting spiritual seekers from discovering any true esotericism. By supersaturating the informational system with watered-down concepts, New Age sophistry, and spiritual capitalists cashing in. Period. So, I'm coming back to do this, to basically combat this spiritual disinformation. So weird. Spiritual psychological operations by Dark Occultists of the CIA or whoever. I don't know who's putting these out there, but they are. And it's obvious, because if you ever fall into the esoteric material, like Manly P. Hall, you don't want to go to watered down versions of any of these concepts, and that's all you ever find in video format. It is difficult to make those videos, I'm sure, but no one's even trying, besides a handful of people like Mark Passio, Gigi Young, and Dark Journalist, and some others that are on the One Great Work Network.com, which was created by Mark Passio to bring together creators that know stuff about esotericism. And it's a wonderful place. You should go check it out. So this is going to be continued. And in the next podcast, we're going to basically go into some of this information meant to discredit actual occultism, what real occultism is, and how it's not what anyone thinks it is. Because alternative spirituality does not have the same ring to it as occultism. Because Hollywood has shown you what they want you to think it is. And so has the Christian hierarchies and authorities over 1,000 years. When it's not at all what people think it is, or portrayed it is in Hollywood. So we're going to go over that in the next podcast. My name is Sam Robinson. I am the Gnostic Syncretist. And the point is, syncretism is an eclectic variety and imbibement of traditional information from all sorts of sources. There's no one source. Exactly. I mean, I've read Rosicrucianism, I've read Anthroposophy, I've read about Gnosticism, I've read about ancient Druidic traditions, I've read about the Theosophical traditions. I mean, there's Mahayana Buddhism. I mean, all these things need to be read about. And the reason I did that was to see if they cross-correlated with their information. And they do. What you don't find is this friggin' nonsense from the New Age about aliens. There was no mention of aliens in anything from the occult tradition. Going back to Atlantis. There's no aliens. The aliens are you. Or fake. They don't even exist. You're the alien. The giant Anunnaki are Atlanteans. The Atlanteans were known to be giants in the Mystery School tradition. Blavatsky talks about it. They were bigger than we are. So it's no mystery why these cuneiform tablets have large individuals giving information to smaller people. The smaller people are the new rude race. The Atlanteans are the remnants. But of course, they're bigger than us, and they have knowledge left over from when Atlantis sank. Some of them left and went and spread out and went to different places in the world after Atlantis sank. And they're said to be giants. There's your Anunnaki. You don't need any ancient aliens. You don't need anyone else other than us building these wonderful megalithic structures. Because that's disempowered. My name is Sam Robinson. I'm the Gnostic Syncretist. Thanks for watching this video cast. And we will see you next time. Please like and subscribe and share this video around. And you have a great night.